Hey everybody, welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and today's Real Talk is with a real leader who happens to be a very good friend of mine, someone who I truly admire, someone who was a colleague, and is an amazing advocate in the mental health space. So Eric Kussin, welcome. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having me. And in us talking right before this, I have to tell everyone that I apologize for being in a random hotel room, that the lights don't come from the front. So if you see me as a shadow, hopefully my voice and the way I talk makes up for what I look like right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny. We were talking about that. Eric's actually on the road. I'm on the road. So we have a little bit of a different background that we had to get used to for this. So folks, we are focusing today's episode, on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as well as Eric's, from both of us from personal experience. And that is mental health. So this episode is kicking off May, which is Mental Health Month. So thank goodness we have such a thing in today's society as Mental Health Month and the focus on it. And I'm going to give a little bit of context, which I'm going to do more so than I do in a traditional episode. I usually jump right into giving context about the person and how I know them, but I just want to give you a little bit of context about the topic of mental health. And I don't even think to the degree to which Eric knows this. I think I want people to understand I'm not just catching on a craze or a craze, ironic term. I think that, and I'm not just kicking off Mental Health Month in a commercial way. Mental health is a very personal topic for me. It's a personal arena for me. I hope that I can do it justice and holding the space here in this conversation for everyone. I've been really open on my platform about my own struggles with anxiety, my own struggles with mental health. And I think that throughout our conversation today, we'll talk about trauma. And I think that the reason I talk about it is because it's helpful for me to understand where some propensities come from for me, not in a psychoanalytical way per se, but so that I understand where things come from, so I can also learn to leave them a bit behind. I can move on from them. I can evolve. And it started when I was very young. I had just a lot of change in my life with parents marrying and divorcing. My mom had 3 different marriages by the time I was 17. My dad had 2. His wife passed away traumatically on my 21st birthday. I had several different siblings that came in and out through marriages in my family. My brother, who I was closest with, who was a stepbrother, had a lifelong illness and died about 10 years ago. So, and kind of the list goes on, but I speak of these things, again, to give context to, I believe that a lot of things that happen can create these kind of trauma scars in your life, and they can impact the way that you perceive the world and you perceive your journey on the world. And so, I've done tons of therapy. I've sought different resources over time. I think it's really been helpful for me to be able to speak my truth, be completely authentic. And so I just really support all of us being able to identify things, speak openly, be on the journey toward well-being. And I think there's an interesting element of that. I think at times when we go through a lot of trauma, there can be different coping mechanisms. And there's a time when we have to allow ourselves to get help. I allowed myself to get help a bit through time, but even prescription help. About 4 years ago, I started taking an anti-anxiety medicine. So again, I share all these things, not that this whole conversation is about me, because we're going to couch that, but it's really because it is such an authentic connection that I have to this. And I just feel so strongly about being open and helping ourselves and others along the journey. This whole platform is about evolving and making an impact, a positive impact. And so again, So that is a bit of the reason for being here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Eric. Eric is the founder of a nonprofit called Same Here Global. And so I would really love for you, Eric, to take it away, introduce yourself, and I guess maybe start out by letting people know what is Same Here Global, and then we can get into your evolution, if that's okay.
For sure. Yeah, I'll go in opposite order because usually I'm asked to tell the story first, but I want to acknowledge you and thank you for sharing your story. The normalization of conversation happens by people being open and honest the way that you just were. And, hopefully as people hear what you talked about, they hear the stuff that you've been through. The stuff is what brings people together, more than the label. We'll get into a little bit more of that. And oftentimes, this is my own take on it, but the label can separate us. The label can put us into buckets. The label can be organization of chaos, meaning that there's no blood test for this thing called anxiety or depression. We'll get into that also. But the stuff that you've been through, God, I mean, to be able to relate to divorce, to be able to relate to the loss of loved ones in our lives, to be able to relate to change and transition from one situation to the next. That's the stuff. We have these beautiful things called mirror neurons in our brains that when we hear someone else share their story, we latch on. How's that similar to what I've been through? Or could I put myself in their shoes? And that's what makes us feel part of the group instead of not part of the group when you say a word that, whoa, we don't talk anxiety in my family, or whoa, that doesn't sound like a term that I'm comfortable with in defining myself, right? But so Same Here, was formed based on my own lived experience, which we'll table for the time being. After not thinking I would, me in my sports career, I didn't think mental health was on my radar screen whatsoever, and that I'd be in this space, but how rewarding it's been going through my own lived experience. It's no disrespect to the sports industry. I don't, you always say 99.9%. I can't ever see myself going back into sports just because of how much contentment and joy and purpose I get out of what I do on a daily basis in this space. Same Here was formed based on, through that lived experience, some of the things that were said to me about last resorts for treatment and about, dead end expectations of where I was at. Believing that that's all there was out there, and then finding other ways to heal, and then taking that information and going to the largest nonprofit websites in our country and our world for that matter related to mental health and saying, that's not the way I experienced it. And that's the way it sounds like, just feeds people into a system that's a factory of medication talk therapy, medication talk therapy, medication talk therapy, putting us into those buckets. There's got to be a better way to explain this to people so that we can all come together as one group. Kind of the phrase that I can't take credit for, but my friend, when I described what I wanted to create, he said, it's a tribe that everyone is already a member of. They just don't all know it yet. And I thought that was pretty brilliant. Again, Brian is his name. I'm giving him credit, marketing guy. So along the same lines as you. But that's what it is. Mental health is a tribe. I mean, the shirt is mental health matters. It's not mental though. It looks like this topic now, with the backdrop of what you just shared, is a group that everyone is already a member of because we all go through challenging life events. Well, if that's the case, then why, when you go to learn about mental health, do you hear that it's 1 in 5 people who are mentally ill? Okay, now you're excluding 4 and 5 people from the conversation. When you ask a room, what does that mean for the other 4 and 5 people? Doesn't matter what age group it is. It could be kindergartners through 3rd grade, because I present to those groups. It could be CEOs, and the hands go up and go healthy, fine, normal, and okay. And if that's the case, well, then no one's going to be working on their mental health in that 4 and 5 category. So we've made the topic binary: 1 in 5, 4 and 5. Then, all these campaigns, since it's May is Mental Health Awareness Month, you're going to see them all over. It's an action word followed by stigma to try and normalize a conversation. Stop the stigma, stomp the stigma, break the stigma. Football now, the Colts have kicked the stigma. I try not to get into specifics, but if the term stigma means that there's human beings forming opinions and judgments in an unfair way about other human beings, When you put an action word in front of this word you want to stop that human beings are doing, that action word becomes a command. You're a marketer. So that's not good. If we form the Eric and Shauna mental health organization and our rallying cry was stop the stigma, the people that we want to stop the stigma are going to go, what are you asking me to do? Hold on a second. You're telling me it's my fault? You're slapping me on the wrist? Look at politics, look at social issues. When you tell people to stop something, they dig their heels in more and they don't want to do it. You need to invite people in and show commonalities and similarities. So now we've taken this binary topic of 1 and 5, 4 and 5, and we've said, okay, the 1 and 5s are now hating on the 4 and 5s, pointing the finger. That's just moving this further apart. And then the way that celebrity stories were being shared, you know, you'd go to these nonprofit websites. This was before social media at first, but the two big names were Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan. And so it was, you know, great news, you're not alone. Britney Spears is part of the 1 in 5 group. She's got depression. Great news, Lindsay Lohan is part of the 1 in 5 group. You're not alone. She's got anxiety. And then they would link to an Us Weekly or People magazine article, and it was Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. You know, I'm going to say something that's crass, but it's what they would say. Opens her legs in the car and isn't wearing underwear, right? Like they would make people out to be these freaks, right? And so now you say, okay, it's for 1 in 5 people. Let's stop stigmatizing that group of 1 in 5. And if you want to know if you're in that group of 1 in 5, do you shave your head like Britney Spears, run off the basketball court in panic attacks in front of thousands of people like Kevin Love, say crazy things about your family and think you could run for president like Kanye West, run off the field with your shirt off like Antonio Brown? How many people are raising their hand going, yeah, I'm part of that mental health group? So we needed to flip the conversation from a marketing communication perspective. That's why Same Here is, Shauna, you and I are the same. Or if I get in front of 2,400 kids like I did in South Carolina last week, I could say that to the whole group and mean it, because as high school kids, they've been through challenging life events. No one has not been through divorce of parents or job loss, even at a young age, or verbal abuse or sexual abuse or bullying or cyberbullying or sickness of loved ones or loss of loved ones. We all go through that. That's the club that we're a part of. That's what impacts mental health. If it gets to the point of something that is called anxiety because of what it develops into, which is a dysregulation of the central nervous system, again, which we can get into. I think anxiety is more of a symptom than it is maybe a, you know, an end game of where we're at, and it's that organized chaos. But so what we did with Same Here, to now wrap in a bow your question, I know there's a lot background there, is form an organization first off where the rallying cry was more inclusive, right? And we talk about it being 5 and 5 instead of 1 and 5, and mental health living across a continuum instead of being binary. And within that, then started to form alliances. So we have the, I don't know a better term for it, it's a little douchey sounding, but the Celebrity Alliance, right? Which is athletes and entertainers and people like that, where they lead with their story, not their disorder. Theo Fleury being raped over 150 times as a 15-year-old when he was trying to make the NHL by his male coach, all the way to, you know, growing up in foster homes, all, you know, different people sharing the different challenging life events that they've been through. And when we do that, then that gives permission to then all these other alliances that we have. We've got a Same Here Psych Alliance of integrative doctors all over the country, all over the world for that matter, who don't just share that they're able to see people, they're sharing their own personal story of why they treat the way they do. Yeah. Then CEOs and C-suite folks who are doing the same thing. Authors are doing the same thing. So you start with these alliances of people that normalize and make it okay for everyone to have been through things that then lead to, and the reason why I was in South Carolina and Texas right now, 5 areas of programming. So K through 12, colleges, offices, sports teams and leagues, and then servicemen and women and first responders. And so we've got a director for each one of those areas of focus, where instead of it being a speaker series and we come in once and we did mental health, which you're going to see a lot of in offices during this month. Okay, check the box. We had someone come in and speak for an hour. We are consultants that come in and help them with everything from culture change to technologies we've created to ongoing engagement.
That's incredible. It's incredible. And I just want to pause for a second because folks, As we started this, Eric said that he has a sports background, and that's how we knew each other. We worked in the NBA family together, in different locations, whatever, but that's how we knew each other. And I just say that, when I talk about this platform being about evolution and impact and leaders, and authenticity, as Eric said, like, this was very much born out of his lived experience. And you have the ability to, all the things that he talked about, he literally led the way in creating, to make an impact, to evolve through his own journey. And so, I think sometimes people look at something and they think, well, I don't know what I could do, or it's not up to me type thing. So I think it's amazing that how much you have evolved this company and all that it is. And then, because there are a lot of people who represent companies or just individuals, humans in society, that are a part of our audience, who are leaders on their leadership journey, they're wanting to make an impact. If people are hearing this, if they want to get involved as a person or as a business, like, can you speak a little bit to that, so that people know how to almost think of receiving this, or perhaps touching it?
Yeah. Are you asking in terms of involved with us, involved with mental health generally, both?
No, I actually meant specifically it involved in Same Here,
Okay.
your actual organization. If they are like, wow, this is amazing, I want to hear more, I want to touch it, I want to impact.
Yeah. So the reason we set up those alliances the way that we did is so that people can share and be leaders. It's a fascinating conversation to share with you, because I mentioned one of the alliances is the C-suite alliance, right? Because we need more business leaders to step up and be willing to share their own vulnerability. And in the other alliances, let's use this psych alliance, right? For the psychiatrists and psychologists and nurse psych practitioners and psychotherapists, their willingness to share a vulnerable story is, I want to say, easy, but much easier, because they're in the space and they understand that we're trying to normalize. And when we were our director with the C-suite alliance, well, what's in it for the C-suite person? And I said, well, if we need to sell the C-suite person on why, when they see that they get to partner with Shamika Holtzclaw and Keith Bullock and Robin Lerner, those aren't the C-suite people that we want. Okay. And I again, I'm not directly answering your question, but I'm starting here and then I'll go down.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Because the C-suite folks that we want are the ones who are finally willing to put the stake in the ground and say, enough is enough. Like, it's important to me in my office, and it's important that my employees know that openness and vulnerability is not only, accepted, it's expected, because you can't feel psychologically safe. And then if you want to get to the performance side of things, you can't perform at the highest level unless there's an openness that you have, that you feel comfortable to be able to share when things aren't going well. And when you have a question that you're not going to get, lambasted for asking that question, or saying, I need to take these 5 minutes to myself. So, it's going back to your question specifically, anyone could get involved in any level as long as you care about this topic. So we have everything from everyday heroes, where we share those stories. They're making the Same Here sign. We give them a form that they're able to fill out, to the C-suite alliance, to the author alliance, to all these different alliances. That's lowest hanging fruit of what's available on the website, to show this unified front. That, I'll use the opposite example. If LeBron James is the champion of Calm, the app, that's one celebrity owning meditation. That's great that he owns it, but he's an endorser in that way. It's not armies of people holding hands saying, here's the consistent message we have to get out here. Here's how it changed. I think that's why we differ. I don't mean that in a competitive matrix type of way. I mean that in I'm willing to do the work every single day to talk to everyone from the store shop owner, and it's not always me, in fairness to our team, to the CEO, to say, how do we hold hands and get this consistent message out there that it's 5 and 5, it's on a continuum, and it's all of us. So sharing your story is the first and simplest way to do it. Beyond that, programmatically, all those 5 areas that I was talking about, we're in market all the time. So if you're a mom and you want to bring this to a school, reach out and we'll partner on an event. If you're a mom and your school is adverse to doing it, like what we're doing in Livingston, New Jersey right now, we'll create a community event and we'll just do it at a rec center that we can rent out. If you're a company that wants to do this, you want to bring this type of programming, you can do that, right? So creating events is one, and then using your name and your story is two. Of course, there's all other things, like we could always use help on the website, right? Like we could train folks how to do things like that. But I think people want to feel connected to something where they're doing something, and the do is what makes them feel like they're changing the narrative and they're a part of it. Your story is powerful, so that's why we give that platform, right? And then you bringing it to your group is powerful, so that's why we give that opportunity. So those are the two main ways I would say people get involved. We'd probably be forever talk about like the intricacies of everyone's little things that they do, but I think those two things are really powerful that people have the opportunity to get involved that way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit to this absolute, I'll call it epidemic that we have in this world, not only of mental health, but also of suicide. And again, like along my journey when I was young, a cousin of mine committed suicide, a very close friend of mine committed suicide. So, again, I think that like that was then, and it was this kind of like thing that happened that nobody talked about. And then you were just expected to keep going on. And I think that we have been just hit with and continue to be like the reality. And I don't say it as a negative thing. I think like we need to be more real about what's really going on. And we're just seeing it from like CEOs, celebrities, beauty queens, all of this to high schoolers, collegiate athletes, professional athletes. I mean, it just, to your point, same here. Like a lot of us suffer similarly. And again, I mean, it basically takes my breath. A lot of times when I see it, I see like, I have two nieces who are in collegiate athletics, and every time I hear about a collegiate athlete who's committed suicide, I just am like, whoa. And I always reach out to my sister, and I just would like, what the hell is going on? Like from your perspective, and I guess if there's anything that you can say about, either signs, not signs, what can we do for ourselves, for others? Again, this is a big topic, but if there's anything that you can speak to about this.
No, look, I mean, I'm fortunate enough that in the alliance that we have, I get to hear from the really smart people, digest their information, and then say, how do we try to describe this in a simple enough, understandable way? And I guess that's why I get to present, is because I can package it in a way that at least is simpler. Trauma, addiction, mental health, suicide, overdose are all cousins that live in the same house. Okay. It's all connected. It's emotional pain from life events that all underscore all of this. Right. Okay. And the problem is the media talks about this separately from this separately. The Will Smith thing, what is that? Right? That's separate. The Katie Meyer suicide, suicide is a separate thing, right? We grew up in the era of just say no to drugs, right? And that taught us nothing other than what a drug, here's an amphetamine, here's an upper, here's a downer. We didn't know that why people turn to drugs is because this thing called emotional pain, that when you're handed the joint or you're handed the alcohol, and even you're doing it in a social setting, and then your body goes, and you all of a sudden feel less on edge. You're like, I want to keep going back to that because I've not found anything that makes me feel that way. That wasn't explained to us, right? It was all about the mechanics of just saying no to these drugs. So the baseline of what's going on right now is we have central nervous system dysregulation. That's the simplest way I could describe it. Meaning, when we are in a state of, let's call it calm, right? We have this thing called psychological flexibility. So go all the way back to caveman days, caveman, cavewoman days. You're sitting around the fire, you're talking, you're in what's called your parasympathetic response, right? So rest and digest, parasympathetic response. You're able to be in the moment. You're telling the stories. You're holding the babies. You're kissing the babies. All of a sudden, the woolly mammoth comes to the fire pit. Now we got to get our weapons out. We got to fight, right? So Psychological flexibility is you're living in this parasympathetic response. The sympathetic response needs to kick in, right? Because that threat just came. Well, what happened around 2000, just after 2000, and then smartphones? That sympathetic response, on top of what we were already dealing with in terms of the divorces, the job losses, the breakups, the stuff that's been around since man has been on earth, right? Is now all of a sudden, with technology increasing, push notifications and text messages and emails and direct messages, right? And then access to news, right? We grew up in an era when the Persian Gulf War happened. We saw a grainy missile with a little light get launched up into an area that looked like it was Mars, like it wasn't even the same planet as ours. Now a kid can go on their iPad, and when Assad, gasses his own children, our kids can watch that and see that happen, right? So collectively take all that. If there's an underlying stress and trauma load that's on all of us, and now add to what the sympathetic response is, that new text message, new email, I have a new deadline, I've got something new I need to do at work, I've got something new I need to do for my homework, and with kids, right? Some people might be looking at, well, how does that relate to kids? Because kids don't have work. Okay, but when they're on social media and they're saying, I missed out on 10 of my friends going together somewhere, I'm comparing myself to those 10 other friends that I didn't have to compare to before there was ever that social media. That sympathetic response goes, right, relative to the parasympathetic response. What starts to happen is nervous system dysregulation at that point. When that nervous system dysregulation happens, that's when we start to feel the symptoms of things like the heart starts fluttering, we start breathing more heavily, we get ruminating thoughts and cognitive distortions, and all these things feel off. And guess what that does? That makes that sympathetic response even stronger, because as human beings, we go, why is my brain doing this? I feel so weird. What's wrong with me? I can't understand this. So you're in this place here that gets even higher because we're trying to fix it and we don't know how to fix it, right? And eventually we get to a place, sadly, freeze mode, which is what I got to, where the system becomes so overloaded, almost like too many windows open on the computer, that the computer blue screens. And the body's doing exactly what it was meant to do, shut down, because there's too much going on. We can't take, that's why my brain stopped working at that point. It was just an overload. Now, I had a rich history of my brother being sick for 20 years, my 3 close friends passing away. That was the bedrock of then all these other things on top of it, right? And I don't think it's fair or right to compare my story or your story, anyone else's story, to each other. Case in point, if you're 3 years old and you go on an airplane and there's terrible turbulence, and another 3-year-old goes on an airplane and there's nothing. Well, as 3 years old, you don't have the words to describe that you're scared, and you're in this vehicle that you know is up in the air and it's going like this, and you've been in a car before, and maybe you saw a car accident on TV, or you yourself with your parents were in a car accident. So you're going, what if this plane gets into an accident and we fall out of the sky? Now, all of a sudden, no one else on the plane is bugging out. So you feel weird even bringing it up to your parents at 3. You're like, everyone else seems like they're okay. Now you hold on to that thought, and every time you see a plane, it reminds you of that thought. That's more of this, right? What I was just describing with that sympathetic response. So for me, what that looked like in real sense was, well, my brother's getting sick all the time. Every time an ambulance passes by when I'm playing basketball, that ambulance is going to be at my house. It's going to be at my house. It's going to be at my house. So what we're seeing right now is nervous system dysregulation of the buildup of that stress and trauma over time. And it manifests, unfortunately, when you talk about the loss of college athletes and people with high performance platforms. Some of us who are the most adept at what we do from a career perspective are the most susceptible to these declines, because, wow, look at how great Shauna is as a marketer. Look at how great she is at forming her own company. So you get in this pattern of, that's good for me, that's dopamine hit, I'm enjoying that. And you're not taking care of this stuff, this heavy bag of bricks that you're carrying around, because you're finding the good feeling chemicals doing these other things. The good feeling chemicals don't take away the weight of the other stuff that is part of that sympathetic response. It just covers it up the same way the drugs, the same way the alcohol, the same way the sex and the gambling and all those other things do. So when you ask me what's going on, that's what's going on. Is we have a society that doesn't realize that all these things are building. Technology is getting us further to that place, and we have to do something about it. We can't just wait for, okay, I'm going to take the drug, I'm going to take the alcohol, or worst case scenario, overdose or suicide happens.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you spoke about it, because I think, again, from lived experience, if you're having these trauma hits and it's impacting your system, and if you're not, when we don't understand what's going on, I think then the propensity for, and you feel like you also have to be silent about it. I feel like there's a propensity to feel guilty, to, you know, feel weird, to feel ostracized, all these kind of things, and then to like blame ourselves. Again, that goes to the guilt part. But I think part of this understanding where things come from, where these layers of trauma exist and how they impact. And so again, you can go like, oh, I get that. I don't need to attach to the guilt, the shame, all of those things. I didn't do this to myself, you know?
But think about how different that heal. So if you break your leg and you're put in a cast, no matter what, no matter how bad of a patient you are, the cast is going to protect you from re-injuring that, unless you're like kicking your leg against the side of the curb, a concrete curb, which most people are not going to do, right? You may like get up and walk around a little in your apartment. You're stupid for doing that. I've done it before, right? But you do it. And the cast kind of allows time to heal. When this starts to go off and starts to become dysregulated, this brain-body connection, we're constantly kicking that foot against the curb because we're going, why do I feel this way? How do I feel better? What's wrong with me? I don't understand this. I tried this and it's not working. All that's doing is taking what has built up and it's making it worse and worse and worse, right? And Theo Fleury, we have a line we say all the time, is like, you can't think your way out of mental health. If you believe you can think your way out of your mental health, you're just, it's a bottomless pit. Learning the tools and the skills and the exercises that help you remove yourself from the situation, that's how you get out of it, because it's the only way to stop the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I actually want to talk a bit about that, which is resources. And I think, because a lot of times we're like, well, what can we do for ourselves, for other people? And I think the resources run the gamut from a platform like yours to supplements that are resources, prescriptions that are resources, all of the things, right? And you were talking about some technology. You talked about some of the challenges that technology can can create in this world or perpetuate. And you talked about some of the technology that's part of the resource, the journey forward. And so, I think I'm not asking for you to name all of the things, but if you can talk a bit about how people can think about the resources or go about that a bit. I think that may be helpful to people who are, again, we have a lot of people who are listening really care about leadership, regardless of age and stage of where they are in their careers, who are a part of the audience. So I would love to help equip people as we go forward.
Yeah, I hope I don't get like a mailing to my house where like a bomb goes off for saying things like this, but I'm just going to say it out there, which is, especially because you have a lot of companies, and so we have these things called EAPs, like employee assistance programs, and what's sold into those EAPs is connection to traditional, doctors for help. Problem number one is there's no culture bridge between understanding, why do I use the EAP? Is it because I'm trying to get diagnosed with this thing called anxiety or depression so that I can get medication? So the most of the help that comes through the EAP programs, because the traditional medical model is psychiatrist, psychologist. So I'm going to get medication, talk therapy. Again, I look at it a little bit differently. I think that's woefully insufficient. And I think over the long haul, over the next 5 years, companies are going to have to come around from that. Instead of it being the quick fix solution of this EAP, there's going to be a lot more that's needed. So we started forming these alliances of, I think, you need two quarterbacks of your mental health. One is an integrative psychologist or psychiatrist, so an integrative mental health practitioner, and the other is a functional medicine doctor, okay? Because one works on the psychology of what you've been through, what the traumas have built, what's the source of where this is coming from. The other works on metabolically when you're talking about supplements, nutrition, what's actually happening in the system. Whether it's genetic in nature or whether it's caused by this stuff, then starts, getting this stuff started. These two have to work hand in hand in one another. That's why we've built that connection between those two, because I need to go to someone who, we'll go to the resources in a second, can show me the exercises I need to do to start to normalize this central nervous system, while at the same time can tell me, here's the changes I need to make to my diet, here's the supplements I need to take, here's the genetic testing that I just did that helps me know that I don't have the MTHFR, or I do have the MTHFR gene mutation, which means that I don't know, my body doesn't know how to change folate into vitamin B and use it in the right way. It's all, and it's things that are a lot smarter than stuff that I can dive as deep into, right? But I dangerous enough to understand a little bit to know that we have metabolic and we have the psychology piece of it, and both of them are equally as important, and they need to go hand in hand with one another in a way that just taking a serotonin pill or sitting on a couch and talking about our trauma over and over again is not going to fix, right? So that's a long way of saying there's a lot of tools out there, and now let's compare it to physical health, and then I'll get into the specific tools. If you went to the gym to either shed weight or to get more lean, or to get rid of the plaque that's in your arteries, so you needed to do cardio, you wouldn't go to the gym and go, that treadmill is all I need. Let me get on that treadmill and start running, and now I'm good, because as long as I run every single day, I'm going to be in good shape. No, even just within the cardio family, there's Stairmaster, and there's kickboxing, and there's the cycling, and there's the rowing, right? So there's all these different things you can use. Why then are we under the assumption as a society, I pick up this thing called Headspace that shows me how to meditate and I'm good now? Because either it works for me or it doesn't. If it doesn't work for me, I'm back to the meds and the talk therapy. There are 50 different things that you can do to work out this brain-body connection. We collectively call them STAR exercises, which is an acronym. STAR stands for stress and trauma, so the two things that build up inside of us. Active, meaning we need to do activities, and then releasing and rewiring, right? So a gym for the brain. And it's everything from Qigong meditation to yin yoga to tapping to havening to EMDR to brain spotting. And I was fortunate enough, I guess, from a timing standpoint, just dumb luck when my thing happened to me the way that it did. I just started reaching out to either the inventors or the lead researchers of these modalities. And I said, has anyone ever brought you guys together and helped marketed you collectively as a whole as not alternate modalities, which is, I think, such a bad name for it, but the healing modalities, what people go to? And back to now compare the concept of a STAR exercise room, a gym for your brain in your office or your school. Compare that to going to EAP and getting drugs and talk therapy. There's more work in the STAR room. Don't get me wrong. You actually have to do activities, but the only way you heal is by working on yourself. The pill that helped you is a symptom management tool. It's phenomenal in that way when it works, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't work for everyone. And I'm on a little bit of Lexapro, so please don't think that I'm bashing medication. But the thing is, the medication is something that dampens the symptoms, that allows us to do, you ride bikes all the time, right? And people might think, oh, that's physical health. The coordination that you need between brain and leg movement and arm movement, that's all a symphony that's going on, that's helping this system move, that's getting you out there, that when we feel mental health complications, we lay in a bed and we do this. So we do the opposite. We hold our energy in. We don't move it around like this, like you're doing on a bike, right? Our brain isn't working and saying, there's a mountain coming up. How am I going to get used to that? How am I going to get ready for that? So that active name in STAR, that middle word, isn't just because we needed a vowel to make it, an acronym that made sense. It's because I learned the hard way. You don't sleep this thing off. You don't rest more and get better. You actually need to do the opposite of what it feels like your brain is telling you to do. You're exhausted, you're numb, you feel like you have a lead blanket on you. It's all the more reason why you have to get up and start doing things. And I'll end that part on this. Even if it's getting your friend Shauna to hold your hand and make you go for a walk each day, as the beginning point that then gets the motor going. Ask your friend to be the person that forces you into doing these things, because I've been in that place many times before where it's like, there's no friggin' way. I'm a rock on this bed and I'm not getting up.
Yeah, yeah. That's so great. So helpful. I think, again, just for people to be thinking about, there's only so much controlling of what we can control. And so we do need to call on these resources, and it isn't just a one size fits all. So, and I love this, we were talking earlier, actually, because I was mentioning my nephew has so much interest in this space, and you talked about integrated fellowship, the integrated approach, I just think is so wonderful. And again, I think a lot of people think that there's only one traditional way to go about it. So people who are hearing this, please know that there's ample resources out there. And, traditional still is what works for some people. So, well, you have spent a lot of time with us here today, and it's been an incredible conversation. One thing I would like to ask you before we wrap this up is just, as people are listening, a lot of times I like to give, especially for a conversation like this, that's, very involved and deep, I guess you could say, are there key, if you could help people on this today, and if there are key takeaways, one or two that you may have from our conversation here today, what would that be?
So the first is, most of the people who will be listening to this, and it is similar to the just say no conversation, is you might be thinking, this isn't a conversation for me, but I'll help out my family member. I'll listen, but we're all like, if you know that wives' tale, or it might be an actual science experiment that someone did, which is kind of freaky if someone did this, but a frog that you put in boiling water jumps right out of the boiling water. A frog that you put in room temperature water, you turn up the flame slowly, gets used to it, and then eventually boils to death. I was that second frog, right? That you might not think you're part of this group. Everyone on this planet is a part of this group. And so what might not look like mental illness to you, that's why I hate those labels, and that's why I hate the anxiety, the depression, the PTSD, the OCD. Your nervous system gets affected over time. Mm-hmm. And everything that you take on and you see is an accumulation and a buildup. It's not you either have it or you don't. It's where are you on that continuum as it's moving, right? And so I think people to start thinking about, not, okay, can I live the rest of my life this way? You worked in the New York area, so you saw people commute at 5-6 o'clock at night, where they have the brown paper bag and the beer in it, and their head is like this as they're on the train, and they go home at night and they don't want to spend time with their significant other. They don't have energy to see their kids. They just want to lay on the couch and watch the game and tune out so they can have enough energy to do it all over again the next day. That's mental health. Whether people want to admit that or not, that is an accumulation of the stuff over time, blunting how we feel, blunting our interest and desire to be a part of life and be vibrant, saying, I'm just overtaxed. You want to call that anxiety getting to that point? You want to call that depression? Because you could call it whatever you want. You could call it nothing. Do you want to live your 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond that way? That's the buildup of this stuff over time. So this is, and that's if you don't get to the place that I got to, that you've been to, where earlier in your life, it builds so much that it creates this crash that happens, but we're all part of this. So why not pay a little bit of attention to it? It's like we're eating cheeseburgers for our brain and not getting on the treadmill for our brain, but we don't see it happening. So it happens slowly. So we're all part of this group would be my first takeaway. And then the second takeaway is that that term that I didn't share my story as much, but the term that was said to me in the hospital was, Eric, you've tried everything there is. Your last resort is to do shock therapy, which was called ECT. Now that was my, story, and that was what was shared with me. But I think the resources that are known out there, unfortunately, are so limited that people think, I've tried the 4 medications and none of them work. What do I do now? I'm done. I'm out of options. And that there's so many options out there. And the reason why it's important to share there's so many options is options give hope. When we think that there's nothing out there that can fix us, and especially when you're in that state, you know what that state is like, where it looks like there's an opaque brick wall in front of you, you're like, my life is over now. Like, where I can't go anywhere from here. Well, no, you can go a lot of places because there's so many things that can help you. It's on, I know we didn't share, it's on all those STAR exercises are on our website. People can go check those out. There's an app called the Same Here Scale that people can track how they're feeling and what events it's related to in their life. And they can see how they're feeling tracked out over time. I mean, use those resources because your life is too important for you to just bury yourself in your work or something like that and say, well, this brings me joy every day, so I'm fine. No, you're not fine, because that bag is getting heavier and heavier and heavier and dragging you down more and more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. I just thank you. I'm so grateful to you for your presence here today, for all that you're doing, for your continued friendship and support from afar. I feel it in what you're doing. And so folks, we will post, when we post this, we will post links to Eric's site at samehereglobal.org, and the various platforms that he has. So take care of yourself and others, folks. Same here from me as well. And Eric, go about your day and make amazing things happen as you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.